Hello, everybody. My name is Yori and you're listening to Becoming Stories of Trial and Triumph. Hi, guys. It's been a little while. Oh gosh, the last 2 weeks have been crazy. Crazy. But thank God, I'm here another day to record this podcast, and I'm so glad that you've taken the time again to listen. I'm grateful for your support, grateful for all the feedback. Oh, God bless you guys so much. Continue to share, like the podcast, share it with your friends, review it as well, and just let me know what you think about the content that I'm sharing so far. Even chime in and let me know what it is that you'd like to hear me talk about, who it is you'd like to hear me interview, and let's see how we can get that happening. Today I wanted to talk about, I'm in the middle of my devotions and I've been saying, gosh, I need to record another podcast. But it's just to find the time, and this week is not looking bright either in terms of finding the time. So I just felt a prompt this morning to go ahead and record this. And I wanted to talk about something that all of us struggle with, I believe. And it's this thing about fear and overcoming fear. And let me tell you, this fear thing is oh so real. Fear is real and it is so crippling. And one of the things that I have learned about fear, first of all, 1 Timothy says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And it's one thing to know the scripture, which I've said before. It's one thing to know a scripture in our head. But it doesn't make sense just to know it, like you know something theoretically, until you have to put it into practice. When you have to put that thing into practice, then it becomes real to you. And fear is so real. I remember I'm a praise and worship leader at my church, and I remember being so deathly afraid. My church is big. By Jamaican standards, it's a big church, and to stand up on that stage and lead people into worship, it was so hard. It was such a difficult thing for me to take on in the very first instance. And I can tell you, when I am growing up, I always was, coming through school, I was always the lead singer. In high school, prep school, I discovered that I could sing, and I would always get opportunities to sing at school. And then going into high school as well, it was the same. My school would enter what they call the JCDC competition, where it was different high schools competing. We were in the song competition, and we would always get either the silver medal or the gold medal. And I was always singing. I was always the soloist. I was always out front. But then when I went to college overseas, I was nobody. I was on the choir as well. And that's one thing. I've never failed an audition. So go to the audition to become a part of a choir or something, and I've always gotten the part. But then being in college, it's so many different singers and everybody could really sing, And I'm the newbie, I'm a freshman in college, and so I'm in the background. I don't have any lead parts. I have to just work with the program. And that wasn't a problem for me. It wasn't like, how come I'm not being picked, don't they know who I am? It wasn't like that. I never took it like that at all. It was just what it is, you're just part of a choir. And there were certain lead roles that were just automatically given to certain people. And that was fine for me. But the thing about that is, because I didn't have the lead role anymore, and I was on the choir maybe 2 or 3 years before I stopped singing on the choir. So when you stand in the background for a while, you can get very comfortable, and I got very, very comfortable. Anyway, so fast forward to moving. So I became a Christian, as you know, in college, and I stopped singing on the school choir, but then I was one of the I was on the praise team at my first church. So of course I got some lead roles there, but it wasn't like in a major way, And then I left that church and started going to the Potter's House. If you know anything about the Potter's House, the Potter's House is pastored by Bishop T.D. Jakes. I was part of the choir there as well. And that choir is huge. And that choir is world renowned. And of course, so you're one of maybe 100 people on this choir. So of course, you're nobody here. You're the newbie for sure, and you're in the background. And it was fine for me. I was comfortable. I can hold a soprano note very well, and I'm good. So of course, I was on that choir for maybe 2 years before moving back home to Jamaica. Moved back home to Jamaica. I started going to Fellowship Tabernacle, and Mark Bennett, who I decided I sat in church for a year before I decided to get involved, and that's a whole other story. I sat deliberately, so nobody knew me. Nobody knew I could sing. Nobody knew anything, of course, other than my parents. Of course, nobody knew anything about me because I was here new. Anyway, the following year I decided. So 2006. Wow, it's been so long. So 2006, I decided it was time to get involved, and so did the audition for the choir, got through, and then Mark Bennett, who was the person in charge of the music ministry at the time, decided that he wanted me to join this group called Voices, and it was 6 of us in the group, and it was such a phenomenal time. It was a really, really good time with them. You know, I finally got back into singing, and singing in a small group. I'd never sang in a small group before, but it was just such a beautiful experience. So that kind of got you more comfortable singing. But then I was on the choir at church as well, and then I was put onto the praise team. So lead parts started to come, but leading worship was a different kettle of fish altogether. And I remember I was so afraid, deathly afraid, to lead worship on. So because you have the responsibility now of seeking the Lord to get a list of songs. You're really seeking Him to get a sense of what it is that He wants to communicate, or what it is that He wants to accomplish in the house on a particular day, and it was hard. Because now you're talking about setting yourself apart to really get from God a kind of direction. Not only that, I was afraid to do it. I was afraid to do it any at all because I was afraid to fail. And then I was afraid literally to fall. So when I finally took the plunge and accepted the responsibility to lead worship, I was stuck in one place. I would not walk on stage. I'm talking about literally. I wouldn't walk on the stage at all because I was afraid I would fall on my face. Literally. And that fear inhibits you. This thing about fear, it's so crippling, and it keeps you away from the things that God has for you. And so I remember we were in a class one day, and one of my brothers came to me, one of my brothers in Christ. He came to me and he said, Yori, it's like he was giving me a word that he sensed from the Lord, and I'll never forget it. He said, Yori, I sense like you're holding on to safety bars, and I feel like God is asking you to trust Him and to release those safety bars and to just walk without them because you don't need them. And I was just so afraid. I was just, because people can be harsh, and people can be unforgiving, and people can be just really mean in church or not. Let's just be real. People are people wherever you go. And I was afraid to hear the bad opinions. I was afraid to hear, just negative feedback. And so I was just really deathly afraid to let go of the safety bars. But, over the years, and then not only that, I was afraid to sing off key, and I sang off key a lot. I sang off key a lot. So there is that, I have that internal fear already. And then, so the fear is there, and it is coming out through your voice. So of course, if you don't come to a place where you are relaxed and you know that you have the goods, you have what it takes to lead these people in worship, or whatever it is, whatever task it is that you have to do, you have to know within yourself that you have the capacity to do it. Because otherwise, if you allow fear to drive you, it's gonna come out and you are going to fall, because fear is there to cripple you. And one of the things I've learned about fear, and it's not to say that I've fully, this is years ago, so it's not to say that I have fully overcome fear. I have overcome fear in certain areas of my life, but there's still certain things that I struggle with, and so over the years I have learned to kind of release my fear and trust God with it. Because a little bit of nervousness is okay, because you don't want to be cocky and you don't want to be so self-assured and feel like you don't. Because when you get to that place, I think there's a fine line and there's a balance. You need to know that you have to rely on God, because it's Him who has to lead you into whatever it is that you're doing. And so that's what I've been learning over the years. And what I was saying before is that what I've learned about fear is that fear is an indicator. You see, fear doesn't come from God. God said that. Like I said before, in 1 Timothy, He says He has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So one of the things that I've recognized is a tactic of the enemy is this fear. So when I feel fear now, when I see I'm very afraid to do something, I'm very afraid to have a particular conversation, I'm very afraid to attempt something, I can if I think about it long enough, or if I really try to get the right perspective, I realize that if I feel this fear, that's the enemy trying to keep me out of something. And so I can't partner with the enemy. I have to always partner with God. And so if God says, and God lives in me, and God says, Yori, I have not given you a spirit of fear, but I feel the fear, and I'm deathly, when that fear comes over me, I'm deathly afraid afraid to attempt whatever the thing is. I have to come back to myself and say, hey, this is a tactic of the enemy to keep me out of something. And not only to keep me out of something, to prevent me from walking in this thing. And then I have to remember that people are connected to me. So if I don't move, the people who are connected to me or who are depending on me to move are hampered. And I can't afford that. That's too heavy a weight and a burden and guilt to bear. It's too much. And I think about that. I try to live with that perspective. There are people who are depending on me to move. There are people who, and whether we want to think so or not, whether we assume the role willingly or not, we are role models to other people. So there are people who are looking up to me. There are people who are depending on me to move, and to take on uncharted territory, to walk in boldness, to speak out on certain matters, to stand uprightly and to say, hey, there is a different way. There are people who are looking to me for that. And if it is that I don't move, and I think about it in a wide way. I think about how my decisions affect others, and how the decisions I make in terms of everything will one day impact the children I hope to have one day, and it will impact their children's children. So the decisions I make have impact. And so if I decide to partner with the enemy, or if I decide to partner with fear, I don't get to the thing that God has for me. And that cannot be, I cannot afford not to get to the thing that God has for me. I'll just share, I am so afraid, and I'm trying, but I cannot pinpoint where that fear entered my life. But I am so afraid to drive on the highway in Jamaica. I'm afraid to drive on the highway in Jamaica. I remember having to go down to Runaway Bay, which is maybe 45 minutes now with the highway away from Kingston where I live. And I remember one Sunday morning I had to go down urgently. And let me tell you, I had to just swallow, because I know that the fear exists. I had to swallow that fear because I knew I had to go. And I said to myself, okay, if anything, when I'm coming back up, I can just ask my friend to drop me back, to drive my car back to Kingston, and then I'll just pay for him to go back down on the Knutsford Express, which is the bus service that goes through the island, and went down and, talked to my friends because I had to go down to my friends about something. And then when evening came and it was time for me to go back, I knew that it couldn't have worked for my friend to drive me up based on the situation. And I had to drive back home. And let me tell you, it was so hard for me to drive back home. But I knew I had to. And I had to take my time because there is such, I don't know what it is, but I cannot stomach the highway. It is just I think the highway is so steep. I think that my car struggles on the highway. But when other people drive my car on the highway, which is few and far between, but when other people have driven my car on the highways, them drive it without a problem. But there is just something there. And I remember going down to the country again with my best friend, and she was driving on the way down, and when we were coming back up, she's like, Yori, you need to take the wheel. And she was driving her car and I couldn't. And she was so upset with me because she's tired, and I don't want to drive her car because I don't want anything to happen to it, and then I'm just afraid of the highway. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But that is something I still struggle with to this day. And the thing about fear is that we can't just say, I'm afraid, and leave it like that. We have to take hold of it, because if we're not, the fear will cripple us. And it is such a thing that keeps us away, like I said, keeps us out of the things that God has for us. And what would happen if my best friend fell asleep at the wheel? We would both be dead because I'm afraid to drive. Something is wrong. Something is for real wrong, and I have to overcome this fear. So fear is not something to be coddled. Fear is not something to just love up and say, I just some mistake, or this is just how it is, and we just leave it like that. We have to confront it. We have to confront it. And I know that a time is coming within this very year where I will be faced with this thing about driving on the highway again, and I have to overcome it. I can't allow myself to partner with the enemy, and the fear comes from him. So I say all of that to say, let us not look at fear as something that we accept. Fear is a driving force. It is a driving force of the enemy. And we have to be wise to his tactics. We have to be wise to his schemes and his ways. And fear can come in different areas. Fear is evident even in our friendships, even in relationships. We are afraid to be vulnerable. We are afraid to open up to people, and we are afraid of being hurt, and that is real. We have been hurt in many different ways. A lot of us can say we've allowed people into our lives and we've ended up hurt. And so another person will come in with pure motives, and they get the worst of us because we determine that nobody else is ever going to hurt me. But that's not fair to that person. So we have to overcome. We have to take stock and look at our lives and really get over what it is that caused the hurt. Because, and I remember that, I keep going back to this thing. And I remember that after our relationship ended, there was a guy who came along and he liked me a lot. And I just was not at a place. And I think my heart was I believe with everything in me that my heart was in the right place. It wasn't like I was trying to push him away and shut him down, or, that he wasn't good enough to like me, or it wasn't like that. It was just, I knew I was not ready. Because I knew that if I were to go into a relationship with him, he would have gotten the worst of me, because I wasn't at a place where I could be to him what he deserved. And so I say that to say we can't allow fear because fear will make us say never again. Fear will make us say, this is not going to happen to me again. I'm not going to let myself careless. I'm not going to allow anybody to come back into my life and do this because some man stay or some woman stay, whatever the situation is, It's not always man and woman. There are other things in life, duh. But fear is what is at the root of that thing. Fear, because you're afraid to get hurt again. So you're not gonna allow anybody else in. But that's not fair to you, and that's not fair to them. And so, like I said, it keeps you out of the things that God has for you. God has relationships for us. He has relationships that are right for our lives. He has relationships that are right for us. And so, yes, you may have been hurt by a friend in the past. Yes, you may have been hurt by someone that you loved in the past, loved in a romantic way in the past. But that does not mean that everybody who comes is going to hurt you. There are people who God has set assigned to your life, and you have to let them in. So you have to overcome your fear. And there are the people that He brings will help you to overcome your fear. They'll help you. Because, trust is built. And so you have to open up yourself. And love is risky. And that's love in platonic relationships too. It's risky. It's a risky business. But are we going to resign ourselves to be alone? No friendships. No meaningful relationships because of fear? Or are we going to get down and say, hey, okay, this happened. What are the lessons I can learn from this thing? Help me to overcome my fear of relationship. Help me to overcome my fear of getting hurt. Hurt, it will come, even in the relationships that are right for you. Sometimes your friend will hurt your feelings. Sometimes your pride, your ego is going to be hurt. But sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes it's necessary to help us to grow, because relationships come into our lives to help us to grow. Nobody has it all together right away. They're the relationships that God sends that help us to get over ourselves, that help us to grow and help us to overlook things. There are relationships in my life that we keep very short accounts. Things happen. It's not that it's just Cloud9 and Skittles and rainbows. That's foolishness. That is fairy tale madness. It doesn't happen. That's not real life. Relationships come with issues, because people are in relationships and people have issues. So there's no relationship at all that exists that doesn't have an issue or issues that come up along the way. However, there must be a resolve to overcome those issues. So there are friendships in my life. Stuff will happen. You talk about the issue. You forgive and you let it go. But you can't allow fear to say, hey, this person hurt me, and I'm not going to allow myself I'm not going to allow anybody else to hurt me in life. What is that? You lock yourself out of relationships. You lock yourself out of things that are right for your life. So, fear. We have to look it dead in the face and say, not today, Satan. And not allow this thing to lock you away from something greater, because that's always what it is for. It is always there to keep you out of the things that are for you. I remember when the thought came to do my master's, I was afraid, because I've never been, or I was never I never thought of myself as very good academically. My grades were just okay. When I did CXE the first time, I failed quite a few subjects. And so because I failed, I had to repeat fifth form at another school. And one of the things that happened with me repeating fifth form at another school is I lost all of my, and I have air quotes going now, all of my friends from my previous school. They didn't talk to me anymore, a lot of them, because I was no longer there. I was no longer with them. They had moved on to sixth form, and I had to repeat fifth form, and then worse, I had to repeat fifth form at another school. So one of the things that happened is I lost friendships, but that was okay. I gained friendships along the way, but I had to repeat fifth form, and my grades were just okay. I repeated fifth form. I did better. did sixth form at that other school, and then I got a full scholarship to go to college. And then it was when I was in college that I did well. I drove myself to do well. So the first semester wasn't so great, but after that first semester, every semester after that, I made a 4.0 GPA, and I realized I'm not a fool after all. I can really buckle down under the work, but I was still afraid of school. And I remember when I was about to graduate, I think it was my last semester of college. So this was 2004. I felt like, because I had put the pressure on myself to make the 4.0 every semester. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself to get the GPA. And I felt, so by that time, by the end of college, by almost the end of college, I was tired. I was finished. I said, I'm not going back to school for now, because the plan was to just move straight into the master's programs. Like I said, this is 2004. And so I said, okay, I'll take maybe a year off just to not have school on my mind. And then I'd apply to school and get back into school and do the master's. And I would have been finished by, like, say, I guess by 2006. Well, I came back home in 2005 and started working, and I kept working, and the master's was in the back of the mind. But then at that point, I was like, what am I going to do my master's in? I don't know what I want to do my master's in. And time passed, and time passed, and time passed, and time passed. And then 2016, I got a prophetic word, and my pastor, same nights that the word came, my pastor said, you need to go back to school. So I said, okay. And then I set a meeting with him just to get some direction. And he said, he told me what to do. He gave me some advice, etc. And I said, okay, so that means I need to go and do my master's. And I was afraid to do my master's because 12 years had passed since graduating in 2004 with my bachelor's degree. And so I still, even though I had made the 4.0, I still had a fear of not doing well. And then a master's seems so overwhelming. It seems like only very smart people do masters. I don't know where I got that thought from, but I just never thought of myself as very smart. I just thought that I could study and I could do my work and, make the grade, but I never thought I was naturally smart, book-wise anyway. So, I remember I was in praise and worship one morning at church, and then in that, there's a space of time where it just it's like the Spirit of the Lord comes in, and you feel, if you're quiet enough, you can hear him speak. And I believe that God said, he told me which school to apply to, because I was toying with different ideas. I wanted to go to a school that was near family that I have in the States, and that wasn't his plan for me. And he told me to apply to this particular school. He told me I would get in and that I would get scholarship money, because I had to get a scholarship in order to go, because of course the master's is not free. Anyway, so I did that. I applied, and it happened just like that. I applied, I got in, and I got the money to help with the tuition and stuff. And but I was afraid to do the master's. I was afraid to fail. And then I remember starting the master's program and submitting, and I didn't realize the volume of work that was involved in doing a master's. Like, I was always writing papers, like, and then worse, I was doing my master's in communication, so I thought it was just going to I thought it was gonna be like literally me just recording my voice or doing different projects, like, I thought it was gonna be more practical, but it was a lot of theory and it was a lot of writing. But I remember that first semester, every paper I would submit, the least grade I would get was an A-. And I'm like, is it that the program is very easy, or am I actually doing well? And I came out of my first semester with a 4.0 GPA for a master's. What? And And then I continued and I continued, and there was my second semester. It was very difficult, and my GPA dropped a little bit because I think I got my lowest grade was a B or a B plus. I don't remember. But the point I'm making is that I was so afraid to try. I was so afraid to do it because I was afraid I was gonna fail. But I passed, and not only did I pass, I did very well, and I'm now finished with the masters. I have the degree. I'm looking at my degree right now. It's sitting in front of me, and I went through the program successfully. So the point I'm making is that fear, if I had allowed fear to say you cannot do this, it is too much of a burden to bear, you don't have the goods, you don't have what it takes, I would never have tried. I would never have. And I mean, the masters I'm gonna have to lay down is a trophy, and I don't see it as any big thing. It's a piece of paper, and it's a trophy that I will have to lay down at the feet of Jesus regardless. So it's not to say, oh my God, I have a master's, do you know who I am? No, I'm not like that. But the point is that in the world's eyes, a master's is a big deal, and I have a master's that I'm looking at. I'm looking at the thing right now. But I would never have attempted to do my master's if I had allowed fear to cripple me. I would never have attempted to do this podcast if I had allowed fear to cripple me. And you know, one of the things that I love about the Lord is that He will reassure you along the way. Hey, you can do this. And the reassurance came in the masters with the grades. The reassurance is coming now with the feedback that I've gotten. You know, and people are connected to you. So you have to move. You can't allow fear to stop you. You must overcome it. It's something to be overcome. And we have to take it by the horns and say, it will not keep me out of the things that God has for me. It won't. And that's fear in every area of our lives. So I just encourage you today as I wrap up, that, you know, you look at the different areas in your life where fear has crippled you. You know that it is fear. You know that you're not having a particular conversation because you're afraid of how the other person is going to react. You're not doing a certain thing because you're afraid that you're going to fail. You're not attempting to open up yourself to this relationship because you're afraid they're going to hurt you. Look at the different areas in your life where you're fearful. And it's little things too. Like, I'm afraid of lizard. And it's a confession that comes out of my mouth. And we have to watch the confessions that come out of our mouths for real. And when I speak to you, I'm speaking to myself too. Because like I said, there are still fears in my life. The highway is one. Lizard is another one. Like, don't come in my apartment. Please just stay outside. Why are you coming in here anyway? You don't belong in here. But these things it's real. It sounds funny, but fear is real. I remember there was a lizard in my apartment, and I kid you not, the lizard was small. The lizard was a baby lizard. And so it was a baby lizard, and I had seen it, you know, so it wasn't a problem because it wasn't in my bathroom. But then, guys, it went into my bathroom, and I had to get ready for work. And I'm sitting on my bed looking at my shower curtain, and there's a lizard playing on my shower curtain. Why are you in here? And then I can't get through to my neighbor to get my neighbor to come and move the lizard. The lizard small, you know, it's smaller than my little finger. This is how fear will cripple you. I'm sitting on my bed, almost the timer run off. I'm about to be late for work because of a little lizard that is playing on my shower curtain. My bathroom from my bed, my shower curtain, my bathroom is like, I want to say, maybe 10 feet away. It's very close to me. And I took my slippers. I finally said, God, this don't make no sense. Like, it's stupid. How can I be so afraid of a little lizard? When the lizard going to eat me? Because then in my mind, and this is another thing. Seriously, this is another thing that fear will do. Fear magnifies something. Fear, it can be something so minuscule, but because of fear driving you, it magnifies the thing. It makes you think the thing is bigger than it really is. So in my mind, I see this little baby lizard in my eyesight, I see this little baby lizard on my shower curtain. But in my mind, I feel like if I confront this thing, the lizard is going to it's going to turn into a giant anaconda, or a giant, not anaconda, Yori, that's a snake. Yeah, it's going to turn into this big something that going to eat me. Does that make sense? No, look at me compared to this lizard. For real though, it's stupidness. It's fool. It don't make no sense. Anyway, so I sat on my bed, which is like 10 feet away from the shower curtain that the lizard is playing on. And I took my slippers and I threw it. And so I just wanted it. Because my fear was if I move the shower curtain, I'm going to jump on my hand. I don't want the thing to touch me any at all. It's that bad. Anyway, I threw my slipper at the shower curtain. And so that impact made it fall on the ground. And I nearly done the spray. I nearly finished the can of spray trying to spray the lizard. That's how bad it was. Foolishness. That's what fear will do to you. Turn you into an idiot. It's true though. We look so silly because the thing is so small, but in our minds, fear will make this thing look so big. But we have to tackle it. It's not something to play around with, for real. We have to tackle it, because here no, I would be late for work, or I was even tempted to call my boss and say I cannot come to work today. And then what am I going to do? Sit in the apartment with the lizard on my shower curtain for the entire day? That wouldn't have worked either. So either way, it don't make no sense. We have to overcome fear. We have to. So my challenge for 2019 is to overcome the fear that I know exists in the different areas of my life. I have to overcome, and I encourage you too to look at the fears that we have, to look at the fears that you have, and really say, what is at the root of this thing? Why am I afraid of it, first of all? And I don't want to be afraid of this thing anymore. God, help me to overcome my fear in this area. And then take the practical steps to overcome the fear. So I know for me, in driving on the highway, I'm going to literally now have to drive on the highway. So I know the time is coming, bestie, when we're going to go on a road trip. I have to drive. And so God will give you people for your journey. So she has to know, come alongside me and to help me to overcome my fear. Because it's real. I remember when I had to go that day when I had to go down, because there's a part of the highway where it feels like a roller coaster. It's like you have to be pressing on your gas to accelerate because it's so steep. You have to press on your gas to accelerate. Then you reach the pinnacle, and then it's like the highway drops you. And then there's signs along the highway that say the decline is such and such a percentage, and you're like, what the heck? So you're seeing the signs around you, you're already afraid, and then the car is moving. The car have a mind of its own, because you have to accelerate at such a speed, and then you're already sustaining that speed, and then the highway have the nerve to drop you. Oh my God. It's like a roller coaster. It's crazy. And so I remember when I was going down the other day, and I was so afraid, and I was speaking in tongues the entire journey, and my hands were gripped around the steering wheel like you couldn't. It's like my hands were glued to the steering wheel, and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It was stupid. It was crazy. It was crazy. But it's real. I think about it now and I feel the fear. It's that real. I have to overcome it. And we have to overcome everything. Every area in which you are afraid. Challenge those areas. Why are you afraid here? What is at the root of that fear? And drive it out. It doesn't belong there. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Let us hold on to that truth and drive out the fear that exists. We're not going to pretend it's not there. It's there. But it's not supposed to stay. It doesn't belong there. But it is there. But we have to drive it out. Take authority over it and drive it out of our lives. In Jesus' name. Have a great day, guys. Love you.